Welcome back to Midlife Talkshop with Rhonda and Shannon, everyone.
Welcome back.
Welcome. Does this sound like you? You lie awake for hours while your mind spins. You wake up at 3 a.m. and you can't get back to sleep. And you turn maybe to sleeping pills, but you feel like they're just a Band-Aid. Does this sound like you? Because if it does, we have a wonderful guest today that can maybe help you with this. Our guest is Morgan Adams, a certified sleep science coach and creator of the Sleep Easy Method, helping women overcome insomnia, reduce nighttime anxiety, and finally get restorative sleep again without relying on quick fixes or medication. Morgan, welcome to our show.
I am delighted to be here with you all. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm excited to chat with you all.
I mean, our listeners are going to really need this information. As you know, we go through menopause, perimenopause, and sleep is a big problem.
Yeah, you are 100% correct. I think the latest statistic that I read recently was that about half of women in midlife are struggling with sleep in some way or form. So,
right.
The time is right to come up with a solution and get the word out about how we can get our sleep in a better place, because we've got stuff to do.
We do.
Lives
You can't
to
do
live.
it.
So how did you get into this? You weren't always a sleep coach. So what led you to become a specific sleep coach?
Yeah. Well, about 20 years ago, I had insomnia. So I had what we call sleep onset insomnia, which is just a fancy way of saying I had a hard time falling asleep in the beginning of the night. I was going through a relationship challenge, and I would just lie there awake for like an hour or two every night before I could fall asleep, staring at the clock. And it was extremely frustrating. After a couple months, I decided to ask my doctor what I could do. And I was given a sleeping pill. Now, at the time, I was a pharmaceutical sales rep. And so the idea of taking a pill to fix a problem was actually just part of my regular life, because that was the currency, is just take a pill, you've got an issue, and it'll go away. And the Ambien did actually help me fall asleep more quickly. However, I had a lot of residual side effects the next day, a lot of grogginess, brain fog, trouble concentrating, also had some of those kind of strange issues. Sometimes people talk about sleeping, the eating after you take the pill. Fortunately, I never drove anywhere. But I ended up taking them for about 8 years, despite all of the side effects. And then I met a man who I was like newly dating, who is now my husband. But in the very beginning stage of our relationship, he said to me, when you take that pill to fall asleep, you kind of act like a zombie and it freaks me out. And I was like, oh my goodness, he's right. Like, it was sort of like my literal wake up call that these pills were not serving me. And so I did what I don't recommend people do, and just take yourself off the pills. When you are on when you're on a psychiatric medication, sleeping pill or whatnot, it's really better if you consult with your prescribing provider and get proper directions on how to titrate yourself off of the meds. Fortunately for me, I was able to just kind of grin and bear it. And I've got a lot of gumption, and I just decided I'm going to get through this come hell or high water. And I got through it. I got off the sleeping pills and slept pretty well for many years after that. And then March of 2020 hit, and we all know what was going on. March of 2020, nobody knew what was going on. We were like being told to stay in our homes, and there was just so much anxiety about like what's going on, that my sleep started to suffer again. And I got concerned because I didn't want to get back on a sleeping pill. I didn't want to go through that again. So I started researching sleep, like how to make it better. And I started applying what I was learning online. And then I started just sharing it organically on Facebook as just like, I found something cool. Like, it was not a business at this point. Right. I just thought people probably might be interested in this. And as it turned out, a lot of women in my cohort, age-wise, were like, gosh, I'm struggling with sleep too. Because I think, they were perimenopausal, menopausal. and were dealing with these sleep issues. And so previous to that, 2 years before that, before the pandemic, I had gotten my first breast cancer diagnosis. And that was really a point in my life where I started questioning what my life's purpose was. And I really felt truly that breast cancer diagnosis was a wake-up call for me to have some different kind of career that involved helping women with their health. But I really wasn't sure how that would play out. So then when I got all interested in sleep and how to make sleep better, it was like, oh my God, okay, I just figured out like that women need help with their sleep and I want to help women with something with their health. And it was just this wonderful sort of conglomeration of things happening. And I decided that I wanted to become a women's sleep coach. But,
Right.
you can't just hang a shingle outside your door and be like, I'm a sleep coach now. So I had to actually go back and get some certifications. So I got my health coaching certification from IIN, which is a pretty well-known health certification program, and then got a couple of sleep coaching certificates that were specific to sleep coaching. And I spent about a year, going through those programs and studying and all that. And then in 2021, I launched the sleep coaching practice, which is what I do now. And the name of my business is not terribly unique. It's Morgan Adams Wellness. So I don't have a very, razzmatazz kind of name, but that's just, people find me. They find me because there are so many people who are struggling with sleep.
So Morgan, I'm going to backtrack a minute because
Yeah.
you told us that you were taking the Ambien for many, many years. Was it 8 or 9?
8 years.
So 8 years. So was it hard for you? Because you said you cut them cold turkey. Were you able to go back to sleep right away? Or was your brain were you able to even fall asleep after going off of them immediately and so suddenly?
That's a really good question. I ended up cutting up the pills and doing it that way. Now, I think I did it in a way that my brain didn't go crazy. But to be completely honest, I don't really remember that time in my life very well. It's because people ask that question a lot. And I don't recall a major thing with me and getting off the pills and lot of side effects. But I do know that just from working with other women who are taking sleeping pills and learning about sleeping pills, that really the direction that most doctors give their patients to get off sleeping pills are actually, in many cases, too quick of a titration. So low and slow is the way to do it. And I do think most people need help. And so I find that maybe most people would find me having already been taking sleeping pills because I'm very open about it on my website and in podcast interviews and whatnot. People do know that I've taken sleeping pills. So they're, I think, more inclined to want to work with me because they're like, well, she knows that experience. So I always want to be really clear about how I approach the sleeping pills in that, I don't pretend to be a sleep doctor or a primary care doctor or anything like that. I always have my clients talk to their doctor about a titration schedule. And quite often I will just write one up, like a titration schedule that I've gotten from my own research. And I'm in a couple of groups with mentors who are in sleep medicine. So I do have some guidance from people who've been doing this longer than me. And the doctor will essentially sign off on the taper schedule. So the doctor's in the loop because that's important. They need to be aware. And then my job as a sleep coach is really to help my client and actually implement the plan and help support her, help her build up her own sleep confidence so that we can gradually withdraw from the medication. And so that's just really kind of what the main premise of what I do is. Now, not every single person comes in with sleeping pills. Pills is an issue. But, I would say well over half do. A lot of them come in going, I'm almost going to be on a sleeping pill unless I can get this sleep straight. So they're on the precipice of that decision. And they're like, I'd rather work with you and spare myself the agony of having to go on a pill.
Well, I'm telling you, you're much needed. I have a best friend out in LA, and her whole life she's had such insomnia. And when I'd go out there, I mean, it's just miserable. I mean, I know when I don't sleep, I'm so cranky and irritable, and it's just, drinking the wine or taking a gummy or anything just to help knock you out, because it is a real thing. So I really want to dive in here, and I can't wait to hear about your program that you offer, this method.
Maybe we can zoom in a little bit on the 3 a.m. wake up that so many women and 40 plus start getting acquainted with. Unfortunately,
Yes.
it's like that
Yes.
witching hour.
What is that?
I know.
I remember when I was in my 40s and it started happening to me. I was probably, mid to late 40s when I started having the 3 a.m. wake up. And it got to be like, I could almost like set an alarm to when I would wake up it was like 3:11 every night.
Yeah.
And you at first you just don't really understand. But I think that, you kind of talk about that there's a hormonal thing, there's cortisol spikes, there's certain stress overloads that you're dealing with. So maybe you can just kind of talk to us about that. The 3 a.m. wake up.
The 3 a.m. wake up is officially the number one complaint I have from my clients and anyone else I'm talking to, like you, about sleep. It's like everyone can identify with this. And so there's a lot to unpack. And I do have just, in case you're out there, like you don't have to frantically take notes, I have a free guide that goes into this deeper. It's on my website, and maybe you all can link to it. But essentially, there's really like nothing to panic about when you have a 3 a.m. wake up. What happens to us in those wee hours of the night is that our brains are not operating from our logical place. We're operating more from our amygdala, that emotional center of our brain. So when we do wake up, we have this tendency to catastrophize and think doom thoughts, not positive thoughts. They even did a study where they followed people. This would not be a fun study to be in, by the way, because you'd have to be woken up like every hour. But essentially what they did was they tracked people in a 24-hour cycle to figure out at what hour they had the best mood and the worst mood. And they found that 2 to 3 a.m. kind of time frame was when people's mood was at the lowest. So I think having that awareness right off the bat is really important, because I think we can get swept up in this catastrophizing. I know I certainly have. I mean, I do this for a living. And whenever I do wake up at 3 a.m., I notice that I do have those thoughts. And I have to actually come back to reality and remind myself, like, you're not thinking in your logical brain. And when you wake up and you're having breakfast at 8 a.m., what you're thinking about now is not going to be so dire and gloom and doom.
Is there a physiological reason for that happening at that time of night, that you're not in your logical brain? I mean, what is going on in your hormones and
the circadian rhythm, like to wake you up at 3 a.m.?
Yeah. So let me back up and also share that there are a lot of reasons why we wake up at 3 a.m. And I mean, there are many. But what I think is helpful for people to understand is that there are a few main, let me just call them the usual suspects that I see in my midlife population. I would say that the top 3 reasons why I'm seeing women wake up, and I'll just kind of go over these. The guide does go into more depth, but kind of broad brushstrokes. Number 1, I'm seeing the wake ups being caused from a cortisol spike. And that cortisol spike can often be from a blood sugar dip. So when our blood sugar dips in the middle of the night, that does create this sort of like cortisol adrenaline spike, and that can wake us up. So one of the things that you can do to kind of do a little test at home to see if that's the case is have a little snack before bed. like an hour
I read
before
this in
bed.
your guide, and I love this. This is
Oh,
very
you like
important.
this? Okay.
Everybody get their notepads and write this down.
Yeah. Now, there's a little
Okay.
bit of a nuance to this because I do talk a lot about having your last meal, your last bite of food 3 hours before bed. And that's still a good guideline to follow. You want to wrap up your dinner around 3 hours before bed,
Actual full meal.
the actual
Yes.
full meal. Now, this little snack that I'm proposing an hour before bed is not the kind of snack that you might think about like
Ice
later at
cream?
night. It's
Yeah.
not ice cream, it's not cookies, it's not chips. I know, and everyone's like, "Oh, bummer." So because that's going to get you on the blood sugar roller coaster. You're going to even have more issues with the wakes. But the really good snack idea for this time would be maybe some Greek yogurt, like maybe half a cup of Greek yogurt with a few almonds, maybe a few bites of your leftover dinner. The idea here is to have a little bit of protein, a little bit of complex carbs, and a little bit of fat. So you're not looking at the simple carbs. You're looking at something that's going to sustain your energy a little bit longer. I find that a lot of women who do like intermittent fasting will get these blood sugar dips in the middle of the night because what they've done is they've eaten their dinner too early, right? So there's a
Right.
very fine balance. Like I struggle with this sometimes myself because I don't really intermittent fast, but I do like to have my dinner wrap up kind of early, but it can't be too early. Otherwise, I'm going to like have this sort of like hunger response in the middle of the night. So that's one thing that wakes people up. The second thing that I find wakes a lot of people up is being overheated. Now, that could be in the form of like hot flashes and night sweats. And I think that if you're having one of those, it's pretty obvious because you may be soaking through your pajamas and your nightgown. But
Yep.
sometimes women wake up and they're not sweating, but they're just a little bit too overheated because that loss of estrogen in menopause actually it helps it the loss actually is going back to temperature regulation. So estrogen helps us regulate our temperature. So when that starts to decline, we have a hard time with thermoregulation, and so we get hotter more easily. We may get colder more easily. And so
Right.
what I'm finding is that with a lot of my clients, because I do kind of a bedroom audit, even though I'm not like physically in their home, we're doing sort of like, okay, what's on your bed? What's beside your bed? Because we really want to look at your bedroom environment as like the low hanging fruit, right? And so,
Yeah.
so many of my clients show me on their bed these gorgeous, thick, puffy
Thick.
comforters. Yeah, thick.
That's what I have.
You're right. Yeah. And I'm like, that should go. That should be off your bed. And they're beautiful and they're cozy and they're great in the winter to snuggle up with, but they can be your worst enemy at 3 a.m. because you're like, oh, I'm so hot. And I notice this when I go to hotels because that's what's on the bed. Because the hotels, for some reason, they either have like one little flat sheet. It's like a little flat sheet and then a comforter on top of it. I'm like, where's the cotton blanket I need? Like,
Yeah.
so
You
instead
have
of
to
that
bring
thick,
your own.
I know it's crazy. I feel like I should like consult with hotels or something because they're like they don't get it. Um,
Do you
so
think cooling sheets can work too? Like cooling sheets, I've been looking at those actually.
oh my goodness. Well, yeah, I there's a okay. So not to sidetrack too much, but
Uh, yeah.
a lot of companies will send me sheets and bedding and stuff like that. And there is a brand of sheets that I disclosure affiliate disclosure just like full stop. They're called silvery rust cool sheets.
Gotta write
And
that down.
I can send you a link and a discount code for them, but they're made with silver thread in them, which I believe is what keeps them cool. And sorry to sound like an advertisement, but like my passion for these sheets is real. It's not manufactured, but they actually are very cooling to the touch. And I was sleeping on bamboo sheets prior to these silvery sheets,
I
and
have. Yeah.
I bamboo's fine. It's soft and it's very nice. But what I did was I put on these silver sheets And my husband and I were both like, these are nice. And then I took them away because of a laundry issue and I put back on the bamboo sheets. And my husband's like, what did you do with those other sheets? Because he sleeps naked. He sleeps naked.
What?
Yeah. Sorry, honey. Sorry, I'm disclosing your.
That's okay.
Anyway, I don't. I have a full pajama cover. Like so. My not really. My body isn't touching the sheets. So if you do have body parts that are touching the sheets, the sheets are quite cool. So I think that's a really good investment. I've also invested in a cooling mattress pad, which I think is wonderful, and not they're quite expensive. So they're not accessible to everybody, but they have definitely helped my sleep over the past few years. So one, just kind of circling back to the comforter issue, what I would recommend instead of that big thick comforter is more of like a cotton muslin kind of bed cover that has more breathable layers versus that big, that because those comforters trap the heat so badly. So I think that's like it's probably like the easiest thing one could do for their bedroom or their bed environment is just get rid of that thick comforter if they have it. And I think most people will notice a big difference. And then the third reason that I'm seeing for the wake ups, and this is like going to shock a lot of people, but it has to be said, it's sleep breathing issues in women.
Oh,
So when women hit midlife and they're dealing with the hormone decline, their incidence of sleep breathing issues like sleep apnea go on the uptick. So before like midlife, it's mostly men who have sleep apnea. So a lot of people think of sleep apnea and they envision Homer Simpson snoring on his couch, you know, with a big belly, right? But once you hit midlife, women's incidence of sleep apnea becomes matched with their male counterparts of the same age. Now, women don't typically present with sleep apnea as a huge snoring issue. They're not like blowing the house down with like a snore, they're not rattling the house. Their breathing irregularities are more subtle. They're more of a pause in breathing. So it's not quite as obvious to their bed partner. And 90%, 90% of women with sleep apnea go undiagnosed. It's wild because I've worked with so many women in their 40s, 50s and beyond who are trim, they don't have thick necks, they're in shape. They don't look the part of having sleep apnea, but once I start to suspect, like it takes me, maybe a couple weeks of working with someone to really like understand their patterns. And if some of the interventions that I'm suggesting aren't really taking, that's when my little kind of Sherlock Holmes hat comes on, and I'm like, okay, we need to look into sleep apnea. So I'll suggest them getting tested, and I think 9 times out of 10, they usually end up coming back with a diagnosis of mild sleep apnea.
that's so
And
interesting. That happened to me actually. You just wake up
okay,
and you're holding your breath. But it was during the COVID time where I was experiencing a lot of anxiety and probably drinking a lot of more wine than I would normally drink just to calm me down. I was very
yeah,
anxious at that time. And I got diagnosed, and then like I bought that machine, and then all of a sudden I never got the machine because there was some sort of problem with the parts, and they were making everybody send them back. But
mm,
all of a sudden, after COVID went away, and I stopped drinking all that wine, and probably lost a little weight, I started sleeping through the night.
yeah,
And then when
yeah.
I got retested, and I didn't have it anymore. It had gone down. So
Yeah, that's really good to hear. Sometimes when people lose weight, the apnea will sort of take care of itself. Not all the time. So I don't want people to think that all they have to
right,
do is lose weight.
right.
The drinking alcohol, though, that's interesting because that's loosening your airway. So that can make the issue worse. Um, so I don't want anyone to think that like, oh my gosh, if I have sleep apnea, I'm going to have to wear a CPAP. Most of my clients who have sleep apnea end up using an oral appliance, which is like a retainer. So it's, not the cutest thing in the world, but it's a lot easier than dealing with a
Hearing that
mask. you know, more portable, easier to, manipulate. So those are really the three main reasons. There are other reasons which the guide will go into, but I do want to sort of wrap the bow on things that I think that you should definitely not do if you wake up at 3 a.m. And I think we have already sort of addressed one of them. And the first one is like, don't panic, don't, and try not to catastrophize. Like, try to remind yourself that you are not really in your best frame of mind. So don't make any rash decisions. Um, don't do anything permanent that can't be undone. The second thing is, don't check the time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So a lot of times what will happen, this is just very fascinating. Our brains are so evolved. What we often do is we wake up, check the time, it's 3:11. Okay. And we wake up again, check the time again the next night, it's 3:11. We basically conditioned ourselves to wake up at that time by reinforcing that wake up by looking at the clock. So if my clients do that, I say, please get all of anything that's a clock face out of your sight in the middle of the night. Like, put everything away, like, fold over or have the clock go face down, or take it out of the room. The other thing you don't want to do is look at your phone. Obviously, the phone will tell you the time, but the phone does something else as well. The phone actually emits some light, which isn't great, and that's not going to be the end of it. But the phone is a very big temptation as far as like getting into doom scrolling and checking things. And that basically eats away at the time that you could be sleeping. So I definitely recommend that people not pick up their phone, not check the time. Those are the big things not to do.
Morgan, we were getting ready for this show, and literally 2 nights ago, I don't have a clock near my bed, but I have my phone over there. Anyway, I woke up and I grabbed my phone, and the title of our show is the awake again at 3 a.m. And I looked at my clock, and it was 3 a.m. on the nose, and I took a picture of it and screenshot the next morning. But you're right. And then I carried my phone around, and then I'm like, this is too funny. It was kind of funny. But that's great advice, to not look at the time, because I think that's our natural inclination, is to want to see what time it is. How much daylight happened.
Yeah. The reality is that it doesn't matter what time it is. It doesn't make it has no bearing on anything going on currently in your situation while you're awake. It also encourages us to do something I call sleep math. Okay. Can you guess what this is?
Yeah.
You wake up, it's 3:00, and you're supposed to get up at 6 for work. Oh, crap. Or maybe even another word that you might not want to say on air, but you know what? I've only got 3 more hours to sleep. And then what happens? Right. You start to get more anxious. And the more anxious you are, the less likely you are to fall back asleep. So you get this snowball effect.
You're in a loop.
The one thing that I want people to really understand, from this show, is effort is the enemy of sleep. The harder we try, the more effort we put into it in the moment, the more it backfires and the more sleep escapes us. So there's an expression, I can't get it quite straight in my head right now, but the expression is something like, sleep is like a cat. The more you ignore it, the easier it comes to you, right?
Right.
Well, this is a perfect segue to go into this easy method and to hear all about that.
Yeah. So the Sleep Easy method is something I've been developing over the past 5 years. It's rooted in 3 main pillars. And the first one is CBTI, which is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And that happens to be the gold standard in treating insomnia over sleeping pills. So there's no side effects, and the results are more longer lasting. And CBTI has been around since the 80s. So it's nothing new. It's nothing groundbreaking, but it really does give a lot of, it's really effective for insomnia. And essentially it involves changing your behaviors, beliefs, and attitudes about sleep. And I'll just give you one example of a behavior. So it's primarily rooted in behavioral change. One of the behaviors that I'll mention is the fact that people with insomnia will often spend more time in bed than they can actually sleep. So let's just say they're having trouble sleeping and they decide, oh, I'm going to get in bed extra early tonight in the hopes that I might catch up on some sleep. Okay. So they stay in bed for 10 hours only to generate 7 hours of sleep. Okay. So I have them keep like a sleep journal. Like I have a Google spreadsheet I designed for them, and they just input the time that they wake up and the time they go to bed. And what I will quite often do is counterintuitive to most people. And I will say to them, okay, instead of, or I'll say to them, you're generating 7 hours of sleep. Okay. So we want to give you a prescription of time in bed. I'm using the word prescription in air quotes. A prescription of time in bed of 7 hours, because that seems to be how much sleep your body's able to generate. So you go to bed at 10 and then you wake up at 5. And so that's your 7. That sounds a little early to a lot of people, but we compromise on something fair.
Yeah.
And the approach that I take to CBTI is a little bit more of a gentle approach than the one that I was trained on. The one that I was trained on is, honestly, I feel like a little inhumane. It was having people go to bed at like midnight, 1 a.m. I'm like, no, that's just not good for people. So essentially what we're trying to do is kind of recalibrate their sleep system so that they're not spending excessive time in bed, not sleeping, right? So that's like, it's called time in bed restriction. So that's one of the things we implement from CBTI. The second pillar is circadian rhythm optimization. And I think everyone knows what circadian rhythm is at this point. But one of the primary levers of circadian rhythm is our light exposure. So we work on getting that morning light at certain times. We also work on how to manage light at night, because quite often we find that there's not enough bright light during the morning and day, and there's too much bright light at night. So we have to like work on flipping that over so that we've got really dim nights and bright days. We also work on regularity of meal timing, because our digestive system has its own circadian clocks that have to sync up with our main circadian clock called our SCN. So we're really trying to create this lifestyle where there's a predictability of our habits and our behaviors. So that's the circadian rhythm optimization piece. And then thirdly, the third pillar is mindfulness. And that's really about nervous system regulation and taking what I call white space during the day to decompress. So a lot of women I work with are very busy with family, their children, maybe their adult parents, and jobs. And so like they're busy all day doing things for other people. And they don't really take these, blank pockets of time for themselves. I call them mindfulness snacks. So it's like these 10-minute snacks that you take for yourself where you don't have any inputs. You're not listening to a podcast, you're not scrolling, you are literally just disconnecting from the world and allowing your thoughts and your feelings to percolate to the surface. Because what often happens is if we don't allow ourselves that time during the day to process those thoughts and emotions, they come up at night when you wake up at 3 a.m. or when you put your head on the pillow at 10 p.m. All of those things that you suppress during the day start coming to the surface. And that's why a lot of us have trouble sleeping. So I have found that when you're weaving in all of these different frameworks, it really does help people with insomnia. And of course, some people need more of one than the other. So I really customize it according to my client. It's not a cookie cutter approach.
That's great. I mean, that's a great advice, because I do think like, you're walking the dogs, you put the podcast in, you're constantly stimulated, doing my Duolingo. Like
Right.
I actually have stepped away from giving myself that space of just being in nature where I'm not listening to anything and letting myself process the thoughts or the emotions or the feelings that are coming up.
Yeah.
How do you feel about, I've gotten into the habit of at bedtime, I listen to a meditation that's a guided sleep meditation.
I love
And
that. I love that.
I sleep so well with that. Well, that and a little bit of the HRT,
Yes.
progesterone at night really helps.
Yeah.
That and a meditation is like my magic combination.
Yeah. I think those are both great tools. I mean, HRT is a whole discussion in and of itself,
Sure
but I
is.
think that it can help a lot of women manage a lot of things in their lives, and that those guided meditations are really, really great. And the good thing is that there's so many now. I mean, like I feel like every day I'm finding a new app, that's
Yep.
got meditation. So there's no shortage of um, of resources in that department, which is awesome.
It's so funny. Shannon and I both, COVID, that's what got me through. I found this English guy, and that is how I could sleep and how I could calm my nervous system
Hmm.
down. And her guy is English too.
Yeah.
Oh my
So
goodness. I love
yeah.
that.
So we have a few just bonus questions here that may or may not have been covered, but the pros and cons of a wearable sleep tracker, because I wear an Aura ring. And sometimes I feel like, it was great in the beginning when I first got the ring because it gave me an idea of what my sleep was looking like every day that I hadn't had before I was wearing the ring. But over the course of 2 months of wearing it, then I found myself always going to that app and sometimes fretting if I didn't get enough sleep or my readiness score wasn't good. So I think there's a fine line between just enough and too much. And
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
are your
Yeah.
feelings on sleep trackers and sleep tech and gadgets?
Yeah, yeah, I echo your sentiments there, Shannon, because I do feel like they can be helpful to understand your patterns, but there's also this tipping point where people get too wrapped up in the data, and it's actually there's a name for it. It's called orthosomnia, which is,
Mm,
you've heard of orthorexia. It's sort of that fear of the food. So
yeah,
orthosomnia is like obsessing over the sleep data and the numbers. And so there was a recent study that was done showing that of the people who were wearing sleep trackers, only 1 in 5 felt like the tracker was actually helping their sleep.
right.
15% of people felt that the sleep tracker was making them more anxious about their sleep.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I suggest for people is that they pay more attention to how they feel in the morning versus what the actual tracker is telling people, because
Right,
we have
right.
something called you've heard of the placebo effect. There's also the nocebo effect. And
Yeah,
how that plays out is when you feel okay and then your sleep tracker gives you a terrible score, terrible
right.
marks,
Yeah,
and then you start kind of having a self-fulfilling prophecy. You start doubting your own interoception, like, oh wait,
yeah.
maybe I don't feel very well. And then you maybe underperform during the day. You may skip out on some things that you could have done otherwise, right? So, number one is pay attention to how you feel and what your own subjective experience of your sleep is versus what a machine tells you, right?
Right.
And
Yeah,
so then another suggestion I have for people who are starting to get fixated on their scores is to wear their tracker every night, but then either look at their tracker in the evening as they're winding down or like eating dinner or whatever to kind of reflect on the day,
hmm,
or maybe wait all week and look at your data once a week so that you have more of a feeling of like the trends over the week versus like the daily headlines. So
right.
I think that the whole looking at it first thing in the morning can be a real detriment to a lot of people.
I would agree.
So, Morgan, I have a question here about sleep divorce and how to manage situations where a partner is snoring or disrupting your sleep and you're constantly waking up, or they're waking up, like they're going to the bathroom, they're doing this. Do we just need
Oh
two
yeah.
bedrooms?
Yeah, it's a really big issue for a lot of couples. And I number one, I don't like the term sleep divorce, although I use it because I think everyone knows what it is. There's
Right.
a therapist and researcher named Dr. Wendy Troxel who wrote a wonderful book called Sharing the Covers. And it's all about how to manage sleep within a couple situation. And I recommend it highly to so many clients to help navigate those situations. But she likes to call it a sleep alliance, right? So the tip that I have is that if you are experiencing sleep disruption because of a partner. Either they're snoring, they're using tech, they have a different schedule, is really have a conversation with that person during, first of all, during the day, not at night, because
Right.
sometimes things get a little bit emotional. You want to be in a place where like it's the daytime and you're really really intentional about how you speak with them, and instead of creating the situation of like blame, for example, like your snoring woke me up and that's why I can't sleep, is like
Right.
presenting this as we have a shared problem here. Let's come up with a shared solution. Like we're in this together. What can we both do to manage this situation? Versus the blame game. The conversation will go so much better than if you're just sort
Right.
of like pointing the finger. But sometimes I feel like the best solution is to actually have a separate sleeping situation, maybe a separate bedroom. A lot of times people will go, well, what about our relationship? Won't it like get worse? And it doesn't necessarily have to impact your relationship, because it doesn't, it's really not about your relationship. It's about your sleep. And one thing that couples can do if they're unwilling to completely like do the sleep divorce is they could have a situation where maybe Monday through Friday they sleep separately, and then on the weekends they sleep in the same bed, so that it doesn't have to be an all or nothing kind of thing. There can be sort of like a hybrid approach to it.
Compromise
I like
there.
that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Had so much great information. I'm telling you.
Really.
I've really enjoyed our conversation. We usually ask about a golden nugget, right?
We do. And you've given a lot of golden nuggets.
I
But if
know.
there was one thing that you would like for our listeners to take away and to take into their day, what would it be? Is there something that you can share that's
Yeah, I think one golden nugget I'd like to share is something that anyone can do. It's free, it's actionable, and there's a lot of science behind it. And I think intuitively we all know it's a good thing, but I think we get swept away in our lives and we forget, but it's the power of morning sunlight. So what I
Mhm.
recommend for people is as soon as they are able to get outside in the morning, like especially now this time of year, it's summer, it's warm. You can go outside without having to put a coat on, and just, like I've been doing this every morning since the weather started turning. I was just sitting outside with my coffee and having my coffee outside and
Yes.
really taking advantage of the sunrise and those very, very beneficial um, light situations that happen after sunrise, because you're really setting your circadian rhythm. You're really strengthening it. You're also getting so many health, sleep, mood, hormonal benefits from those really important, periods of light that happen right after sunrise before the UVB rays start coming in. So, you don't need a ton of time. What's that?
Is there a certain like 7 a.m., or is there any time that you
Well,
recommend?
it depends on where you live. There's an app called it's called My Circadian App, and
Okay.
it's a free app. And you enter in your zip code, and it will give you this whole display of when sunrise happens, when UVA rise happens, when UVB light happens, when sunset, daybreak, the whole gamut. And it'll alert you to when you should be outside, so that you have this like nice little light schedule that you can follow. And I follow it fairly closely. I mean, at this point, I kind of know what I'm doing, and like it's not new to me, but I introduced this concept and this app to my clients. And when they start to follow it, they're like, okay, this is going to sound crazy, but it's making such a difference. And people
Wow.
are like, why didn't anyone tell me about this before? Like, why didn't my doctor tell me? And why don't people know? And, my answer to that is, well, okay, one of the reasons why people don't know is because honestly, there's no money to be made here.
Right.
It's not a supplement. It's literally a free supplement you can take, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't cost anything. It's available to
Gina,
anyone.
She tells me, get outside first thing, just go out and get that sun.
Yeah.
I like to go out, just do like a yoga stretch or two, and just,
Yeah.
have a moment where you're just grateful that you woke up that morning, and how can you start your day in a positive direction. So I think it's really important to get that morning sun, and you feel so much better starting your day.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a great way to begin the day, and it doesn't require a lot of time. You don't need hours outside. 10-15 minutes is really a good amount of time for most people, and it does make a really big difference. Just trying it for a week. What's that?
Mother Nature's free. So far, she's not charging for her supplements.
That's right. She's free, available. Yep.
Yeah.
Always usually reliable.
Yep. So we have so enjoyed having you on. Appreciate it so much, and all this great information. Where can we find you? I know that you have your website, morganadamswellness.com.
That's right, morganadamswellness.com. You can find the free guide about 3 a.m. wake-ups on the website. You can also find the opportunity to schedule a consultation with me if you feel like you need a little bit more sleep support in a one-to-one capacity. I'm also pretty active on Instagram. My handle there is morganadams.wellness. You can come into my DMs and say hello. I clearly love talking about sleep, so please don't be a stranger.
All this talk of sleep is just really leading to a good nap today.
Yeah. Sounds like a great idea.
And I'm going to make sure my girlfriend gets this episode, because it's just it's people who can't sleep. It's really torturous. It is not torturous. Fun, it's very frustrating. So thank you so much.
Thanks again, Morgan. We will put all of this information in our show notes and on our Instagram and Facebook. So we hope that you all will follow and share with a friend.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Please follow Midlife Talkshop podcast on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Hit the like button, leave us a comment, and share with your friends.